Welcome to the Wild Type Podcast. I'm Lyssa Lizards.
I'm Neptune and Chameleon.
And we're your reptile girlies. Well, today I don't have my stick straight hair that I usually do.
I know. This is your first time on the pod.
It's real weird. So for any of our reptile girlies listening, I never ever curl my hair.
I've seen your hair curling maybe 5 times in like the 5 years.
Oh yeah, I think that's an exaggeration, but close.
Not very often though.
So I hardly ever curl my hair, and it's mainly because my hair doesn't hold curl like at all. I know I've talked and complained about my hair in the past, and it just like does not hold. So, but I had to shoot content for a client today, and I had to use hair products and whatever. So
curly hair it is.
I have wavy hair today.
Welcome to the dark side.
I wish I could. Like, curly hair is beautiful. I love it. I just like my hair does not participate.
Whenever I wear my hair straight, people are like I look totally different.
On the flip side, I think I've only ever seen your hair straight maybe 3 times.
Yeah, it's not often.
No, yeah, it's very, very similar. I
just feel like it makes curly hair has more volume, but like whenever I straighten my hair, I just feel like it makes my head just look like so.
Welcome to my everyday life.
Yeah, it's just a very different look if you're used to your hair poofing further. But I will say I do enjoy like a good straight ponytail. I like that look for sure.
Yeah. Well, to jump right into it after a little brief hair chat.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be talking about how to tame down reptiles and just like tips and tricks for that.
Yes, which I feel like is a very common thing when we're talking to new keepers or when you're looking at getting a new animal is, how often can I handle them? Yeah. Why does my reptile like hate me? Yes. And like a lot of those things. So hopefully through this episode, people can have kind of realistic expectations on what to expect when it comes to handling a reptile. And then also some tips and tricks, because there's definitely things they can do.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of those. So do you want to jump into it, or would you like me to?
Okay, I wrote the first thing is wait for them to settle in.
Oh, that's a great tip right out the gate.
Yeah, because a lot of people, and I'm guilty of this, like you get a new animal and you're so excited and you're like watching them and like, are they eating?
It's
and
so hard to be patient with this.
But the best thing you can do is leave them alone, especially when it comes to handling and building trust, because they are feeling so defensive and scared. I mean, there's exceptions. There are some who are like totally chill from day one. But if you're watching this episode or listening, you're probably not the one who has the chill chill animal. So assuming they're not chill, the best thing you can do is leave them alone, because they're going to be very scared and defense. And if you go in trying to handle them or be up in their space, it's not a good idea.
And honestly, like that's something that like we recommend regardless of like taming them down. It doesn't matter. Any new reptile that you bring into your home, you should always leave them be for, I would say, at least a week or 2.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the general rule.
My golden rule is 2 weeks before you're trying to handle them. And this is what I always tell people. If you're bringing them home or you're shipping them in, take that moment from when you're taking them out of like their bag or container or whatever it is they come in, take your cute picture with them like while because that's probably the only time you're going to handle them for potentially weeks or even months before you're able to get to the point where you can comfortably handle them again. So when Venus was the first animal I had shipped to me, and she was a little peanut, like 3-4 months old, and so there's literally a picture of me like of just like holding her and I'm like, okay, here you go, and just like put her in her enclosure. And it took me, I think, another like 3 months before I was able to handle her again. So I always say take advantage while you like unbox them or whatever.
That is your moment. That is your moment. Use it.
Yeah,
Don't waste it.
That's my first tip, is give them time to just settle in.
No, that's a really, really good one. So this is something that I would say I pretty much have only used for my snakes. A lot of my tips are going to be snake handling.
Mine will probably be more lizards.
Yeah.
So I think between the two of us, we'll have a good mix.
We've got like good coverage here. So for me, something that I did, and I've actually only done this one with Tarzan, but it's one of those weird things where like I don't know exactly how much it helped, but I like to believe that it helped.
Yeah.
I knew that he was going to be really defensive right out of the gate, just because that's the nature of that species, of the yellow anaconda species. And so, but something that I heard from a lot of people was similar to like dogs, you could literally put like a used, worn article of clothing of yours that has your scent on it in their enclosure to help. It's not that it's like it's not that it's going to guarantee that they're going to know your scent, but at the bare minimum, it'll help familiarize them with your scent. So that when you are eventually handling them, they will smell you and be like, oh, that's that smell of that weird thing that was in my
I have
enclosure.
never heard of that with at least lizards, but that's, I think if it works, great.
I'm pretty sure that I've heard of people also doing this with like bigger lizards, like
Bigger
monitors
lizards, I
and
can
things
understand.
like that.
Yeah.
So for me, that's something I only did with Tarzan because I was like, I'm doing everything I can to make sure that
what's the worst that's going to happen, right? Like nothing to lose.
It's worth a shot. If it gets them used to your scent, then that could be beneficial. You know, I like I said, no guarantees or anything, but it's just, why not try it?
The other tip I had was pick a species that works for you. Like, what are your expectations and what are you wanting out of an animal? Because some species are more likely to be handled. There we go, handled versus others. So, like a yellow anaconda, for example, does not have the reputation of being a snake that does well with being handled all the time. You knew that going into it, and so you're able to take steps, but you were fully prepared. Like, as long as I'm able to handle this animal for X, Y reasons, like you were good. Panther chameleons in general are not known for being animals that are handled all the time. Some do totally well with it. Barney, so chill.
He was an angel.
Luna, so chill. Neptune and Venus, not about it.
Nope.
Right? But I knew that going into it, and I was totally okay with that.
And I would say that's probably like, this isn't a tip that I had written down, but just in this conversation, like, I think setting your expectations is incredibly important because, I mean, we've talked about this in previous episodes, but like I all the time will get comments being like, does it bite? Does it this and that? And like the answer to that is yes, anything with a mouth can bite. So like set those expectations that like if you're getting a reptile, there's a 50-50 shot that you're going to get bit at least one time.
Right.
And there's also 50% of that is you will get bit a lot. So it's like set the expectations now that like you could get bit, it could happen, but as long as you're willing to put in that work.
Yes.
And obviously doing the research on the species too. You know, some species are less likely than others and things like that. But you have to set those expectations, and that was something I also did with Tarzan was like I looked at the situation, I was like, there's a possibility he might not ever tame down. And if that happens, how am I going to approach that?
Right. What are your options?
How am I, you know, so you want to make sure that you're setting your expectations of, you know, what does it look like if I can't tame this animal down?
And reptiles in general are not super handleable animals to begin with. Right. Like something with fur is gonna be a lot more, cuddly than something that has scales. And that's just the nature of reptiles. Totally. They're solitary animals. This is how they've survived for this long. And so we have to be respectful of that. That being said, there are things that you can do to help build that trust. And there are species that are more inclined to be less fearful.
But still, no guarantees.
No guarantees, exactly. So I think it's an important part of the research process is what are your expectations? What do you want out of your relationship with your animal? And what species is going to be complementary to that?
So you just said something that I find really interesting, and that was something I wanted to bring up of like, what do you want to get out of that relationship with this specific animal? Because that is something that like has shifted for me with different ones of my animals, like certain ones, you know, as I've gotten to know them and their personalities and what they like. So I've talked about this before, but with Hazel, my Hog Island boa constrictor, I do more of a choice-based handling method with her. And that is because I have come to learn that she is not one that tolerates or enjoys being taken out of her enclosure unless it is something that she is choosing to do.
Yeah.
It's rough getting her out of the enclosure if it's not her choice.
That's how it is with Neptune as well. And so there are some animals where you're willing and wanting to put in the time to build that relationship where you can handle them on a daily basis or weekly basis or monthly basis. But I think at a minimum, every reptile keeper needs to be comfortable handling their animal in case of emergencies. Like what if there was a fire in your home and you got to like get everyone out?
Of course.
What if you need to take them to the vet or you're doing your monthly just like overall wellness, like
for sure
health check. So some tips that we can give, I guess, going more into like the handling thing, I think being consistent is a big thing. So you've set the expectations of what you want your relationship to be like, how often you want to be handling these animals. Like, so then you have to be putting in the work, assuming that they're not naturally, you know,
Totally. It's just setting those expectations, I think, is if you want to go the choice-based handling route, I think that is amazing. And obviously with that, you have to be able to handle them. I'm not saying you can't handle them, but that is still a method that a lot of people are using these days. And you can get a lot of tips on that on different YouTube channels and things. But you kind of have to make that decision before you even get the reptile, or as you go, you can make that decision, but it's just something to consider. So for example, when I, had Tarzan and Barney specifically, I was like, I want to be able to handle them. And that is something that I consistently went and did.
Yes.
So for the consistency piece of it, for me, what I think has worked and what I know a lot of people do is these short daily handling sessions. And that is something that I highly recommend. That was something, and for Tarzan specifically, it actually wasn't short. It was an hour long every day for over a year, because whether Tarzan liked it or not, he was going to have to be handled. And so that's where there's the difference of like, is it an animal that, is it going to be a larger animal? Is that something that is going to, know? So I think you need to know which route you're going to go and kind of figure that out. But the consistency piece is imperative to basically get that done first, so that you can consistently handle them and they'll slowly, hopefully get more used to it. So I think with certain species, the 15 minutes, if they're highly, highly defensive, I think that you don't want to go too long. And so you kind of have to gauge their personality.
And know their body language and know what the fear response is for your animal. Pay attention to coloration, right? Like that can make a big difference. Obviously, if there's
certain species,
gaping, hissing, biting, all of that, gloves are your friend. If that's something that could be a thing. So what would you recommend for someone who is like, okay, I want to put in the time. I want this animal to be one that is comfortable with being handled. They're like new to reptile keeping, or maybe it's their first snake or something. How do you even get them out of the enclosure for the first time? Because I have to imagine that is so incredibly intimidating, and I'm just having flashbacks to 6-month-old Neptune, and I'm like literally shaking, like putting my hand near him because he's like, like, so how do you even do that?
I mean, with snakes in particular, that was something I really wanted to talk about, was tap and hook training from day one is really crucial in my opinion, because you want them to be able to understand when it's handling time and when it's feeding time. And that starts from the very beginning. And so there's different ways of going about it, but if you're hook and tap training them and using that tool is incredibly helpful. Obviously that doesn't work necessarily with chameleons.
We're talking snake hook, because I feel like we should give like a little context. So can you explain what tap and hook, like what the...
So,
because I'm like taking notes. Not that I'll ever own a snake, but I'm like, ooh, this is interesting.
Yeah. So that's what I wanted to get into. So basically, tap and hook training is something you use with a snake hook. You go into their enclosure. I like to spray mine with water from the mister. So that's also an indication of, hey, a hook is coming next. You're about to be handled. And when I feed, I don't use a hook. I don't use water. I don't use anything. So it's feeding time. So that way they know the difference. But essentially what you do is you take your snake hook and you kind of like rub it down, not rub, but like you just place it down along their body for a little while. I would say about 30 seconds or so. And then after that, you start to scoop them up with the hook and then start to transition them out of the enclosure onto your hand. And then you work into handling from there. So that's kind of how it starts. And a lot of people, I keep saying tap and hook because those are kind of two separate things. Some people will use the hook just to tap the snake on the head to notify them like, hey, this is not feeding time. And it kind of gets them out of that feeding response mentality. And so that's a big piece of it, is just tapping on the head. I personally like to kind of place the hook and touch them with it for about 30 seconds, just because Tarzan, if I don't do it for a little bit longer, he's a little bit more confused. And so I think you can go either way with it. I mean, you can kind of come up with your own method, but that's the gist. So, and then from there, like, obviously when you first get a reptile, you're going to be nervous.
Yeah.
But literally, I hate to say this, get over it, get confident, because if you're nervous, they're nervous, period.
Right.
Like that's the number one thing. Like they pick up on your vibrations, on your heartbeat, on your, like they pick up on those things.
Yeah.
So I think that just goes straight back to the expectations.
And
Expect to get bit.
Yeah, and pick a species that you're comfortable with. If that sounds something like is terrifying to you, like I'm picturing you doing this with Tarzan and then me going to your reptile room and you're like, here's a hook. I'm like not okay. Like imagining that scenario.
Yeah.
But that tells me I am not a snake owner.
For
right?
sure.
And like
For sure.
there's part of it where like you may be uncomfortable, but you're willing and wanting, like the outcome is worth being uncomfortable because you're like, okay, I want a snake that I can handle, that I have that relationship. So I'm willing to be uncomfortable for these next couple minutes, couple months, however long it takes, because the outcome is worth it. Even if it means you might get bit.
I'll never forget, because I was still getting used to the hook training when I was working with Tarzan, because I kind of stupidly didn't really do a lot of hook training with my other snakes because they weren't going to be that big, so I wasn't as concerned about it.
Sure.
And so I really only started working with hooks with Tarzan, and literally every snake owner ever should have a snake hook. I'm adamant about that. It is just such a great tool to be able to scoop them up even better than your hand.
Are there certain snake hooks you would recommend over others? Because like we go to expos and I just see like the table that just has like a bunch of hooks. Does it matter?
I think it depends on the species. Like certain species, there are types of snake hooks that aren't even a hook. It's like a clamp. And I don't like those because I want the snake to be able to like move freely on the hook, because I think that also builds a little bit more trust.
Yeah.
And so, but there are the clamp kind. I prefer one that is rubber tipped so that it's not as cold as the metal. So it kind of comes down to personal preference though. But if any of them are pointy, I would definitely not do that. That feels a little weird. I don't know why. Some of them are pointy and I'm like, why are you pointy? Why are you sharp? That feels crazy. So, but yeah, I like the rubber tipped ones just because it's not as cold as the metal. But you know, they're cold blooded. I don't know how much they care.
Yeah.
But
it's not like it's like a heated snake hook or something.
But there's all different kinds of sizes. There's the tiny little ones, which I actually use quite a bit. And then there's like the bigger one, which I use much more with Hazel because she gets back in the back and wrapped around her branches so that I can't get her out. Yeah. But I think just, God, I mean, the number one thing is, like you said, it's consistency, you know, and once you start getting used to it, I'll never forget when I would take Tarzan out at first, I didn't do a good job at transitioning him from the hook to my hand because I was so nervous he was going to bite me. And so that took an adjustment too. So, but you do have to be careful, again, specifically with snakes, because you want to support their body in more than one place.
Sure.
So you don't necessarily just want to pick up the hook with them hanging off of it. That's not really... It's mildly dangerous for them if, you know, part of their back or vertebrae get a little bit wonky on it. But, you know, so it's an adjustment. It's a weird...
And too, I think as you have more, I'm going to use the word sessions, right? Like more handling sessions, you learn their body language.
That's huge.
And you learn their personalities and you learn what are... I'm going to use the word triggers. I don't even know if that's the right word, but things that kind of like make them go and get into that defensive mode, right? Like for a lot of reptiles, that's coming from up above, right?
Huge.
Like that is a very scary thing for them.
This is why,
if you come from up above, but like you may hear that, but you don't realize you're doing it until you see the reaction of your animal, and you're reminder. Like, oh, you know, or your dog across the room. You don't look at them as a threat, but then you take out your reptile and they see your dog, and then they like freak out. So it's just, and that's, I guess, another tip. If you're gonna do a handling session, please keep all pets out of the of the room.
That's
you don't need
one.
You don't need to be nervous and handling your reptile, and your dog's like, hey mom, like what are you doing over there? And you're like, that's just not not a good idea.
Yeah.
But
we have a number one rule in my household: the dog is not in the reptile room if one is out.
Yeah,
that is
absolutely.
huge.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just, there's a lot that goes into it that you just pick up with time. And we can try and explain to you guys like signs of a defensive animal, things to pick up on, but you kind of just have to roll with the punches.
Part of it is just like time, experience, and consistency. But one other thing I will say that has, at least specifically with Tarzan, been really, really incredible. I know I keep talking about Tarzan, but he was the one that took the most taming down. So it's my most important experience. But setting the environment for the handling session, for me at least,
need some candles and mood lighting and
I wish that was the case. That would be lovely. But if you set the scene, and what I mean by that is you have enrichment things out for them. So I love to have towels laying on the bed or on the floor that he could burrow in and kind of smell and feel the different textures and things like that. Because I personally, and I know you know this too, when you take them out, you want them to associate being taken out with the good or new
Positive
and exciting
experience.
things.
Yep.
So positive experiences are key. And if all you're doing during the handling session is literally just holding them, they're not necessarily getting anything out of that.
There's also, I think, an intermediate step when that you can just take them out of their enclosure, either like if it's a lizard, like with a stick, if it's with a snake hook with the assistance of a hand, but you're handling them for a minuscule amount of time and you're transferring them into some sort of enrichment opportunities. The towel thing for snakes makes total sense. For my commands, I use a fake tree from Home Goods. I did that with Neptune prior to even actually handling him. I would just put his tree in front of his enclosure, and he associated coming out of his enclosure with a positive experience, which was that enrichment. Because he's like, oh, if I come out, I get to be on my tree, and I can take that tree, since I'm not touching him, and put it outside. Now he's got natural UVB, and like this is a whole positive experience. Of course, always supervised. I did not handle him once during that entire interaction, even putting him back.
But it builds trust.
Exactly. Yes. And if I come out, good things happen. You should have seen me though, because I couldn't handle him. I had my Home Goods tree, and I'm trying to put him back in the enclosure, and I'm like angling it, and I'm like shaking it, and I'm like,
get out. Get out. Yeah. No, that's fun too.
But yeah, like you're saying.
But I think the setting the scene, and I do that too, actually. I'll get like fake plants that they can kind of, play around in and stuff like that. And even just like old clothes of mine, again, for more scent familiarity. Like I just think having an environment to allow them to explore without being manhandled, I think helps significantly, because then they realize that when they come out, it's not just being manhandled, it's other good positive things. I'm going to get to explore, I'm going to get to see new things, new textures, new smells.
By now, you guys know we're big fans of Pangea Reptile, and every month they come out with their different sales. For the month of May, they're coming out strong with their crested geckos on sale, including their lily whites.
You can't miss a lily white, guys. I'm literally still dying for one. So that's huge. But they're also even releasing some brand new isopods like the white shark, red panda, and blue pigeon isopods.
I have to check those out.
I've never even heard of those. They sound amazing. And their Memorial Day sale is going to be huge with some Pangea products, cork bark, all the Reptile Systems products, and more.
For all of our chameleon keepers out there, their Repti Breezes and T5 fixtures will be on sale. So be sure to take advantage. Head over to PangeaReptile.com and shop their sales.
Hey guys, it's Lyssa. I'm all about bioactive reptile keeping, and that can be a challenging new adventure to start. I remember when I first started, and there are so many different components you need to focus on, and it can just feel really overwhelming. But luckily, I have some great resources to help you guys out. First are my idea lists, which are basically shopping lists on my Amazon storefront. I've put together all of these lists for most of the commonly kept reptile species like leopard geckos, ball pythons, New Caledonian geckos, northern blue-tongued skinks, and several others. Each list includes links to the majority of what that species would need for the perfect bioactive environment. My last resource is discount codes. I know reptile keeping can get really expensive, so if you're looking for some great discounts, always be sure to check my link tree, which is available in my social media bios at Lyssa's Lizards.
It can be hard when you're first getting into reptiles to know what to buy and find a kit that actually has everything you need. Luckily, I've partnered with Pangea Reptile to make a chameleon kit that includes all the supplies you need to properly raise a pet chameleon. I created 2 different kits. The first is the basic kit, which has all the essentials, including the proper enclosure, heat and UVB bulbs, supplements, a hand pump mister, and more. And the second is the advanced kit, which includes everything the basic kit comes with, plus a Mist King mister, plant LED light, and fogger. The kits are available on my website, neptunechameleon.com, and while you're there, you'll also find step-by-step tutorials, discount codes, and the answers to commonly asked questions. Thank you in advance to anyone who decides to purchase a kit, shop through my affiliate codes and links, and for tuning into the podcast. And we have to ask ourselves too, like, why are we handling them in the first place? Are we doing it because we want to? That, and I don't mean this any type of way, it can be a little selfish, right? That is for our benefit. That is not for their benefit. But by handling them just for a little bit, get a cute picture, whatever. But then give them an enrichment opportunity. You are now enhancing their quality of life, which to me seems worth a small period of time where maybe you're uncomfortable, they're uncomfortable, whatever, versus you're like, I want to handle it because I want to enjoy it. And I'm like,
And that right there is why I'm such a big fan of the choice-based handling methods, just because, and again, you obviously have to be able to handle them at certain points. So I probably personally wouldn't do the choice-based handling methods until you've gotten like them more used to it in general, and then move into the choice-based, because that's what I did with Hazel. I would handle her all the time, whether she liked it or not. And then once that just never improved, I was like, all right, we'll move to choice-based with you. I can get you out if and when I need to.
And that's the most important thing. And I've had that with all of, like with Pluto, I don't handle him, but I'm confident if I need to get him out, I can get him out. Same with Neptune. I don't handle him, but I'm confident if I need to get him out, I can get him out. Right. And that's just through like using sticks and understanding their body language and figuring out where to go. And like, there's so many things that you can do if we want to switch kind of to like the lizard side of it. Like, don't underestimate the power of a tree bug.
Food. I was literally just thinking that's the next thing we should talk about.
It's all conditioning, right? This is why we want to have enrichment opportunities that are positive experiences. We're going to give them treat bugs. If you can hand feed them or, give it like serve it on a little like plastic lid. I've done that because I don't like to touch the bugs. And tongue feeding can have risks associated with it, especially if you're new to...
Like with Nilla, hornworms are her number one favorite. She loves superworms too, but mainly hornworms. But what I'll do if and when I have her out, which she comes out all the time, she's easy, but I'll around the reptile room put different hornworms and I'll let her go and find them. And so that is a big thing. Obviously I don't just like leave the bugs out. I'll do like 2 at a time max,
right.
But she finds them fast. She just goes sprinting down the other way, and I'll go gobble it up, and then I'll put the next one down and she'll go down. And so that's something she learns that, I mean, I never take her out without giving her at least one treat. And so that treat bugs are huge for lizards especially. And
so good options beyond hornworms would be waxworms and superworms, especially if you have a baby lizard that's not old enough or big enough to take hornworms. Those could be good like intermediate bugs.
Yeah, but you obviously want bugs that, since you're not putting them in the enclosure, you don't want bugs like dubia roaches or crickets that are going to get away from you.
Oh, no.
So we're talking mostly worms here.
No. Yeah. But what you can do is just put one on the lid, put it near your reptile. But even before then, just putting your hand near them, odds are...
While they're eating is big.
Yeah. Odds are they'll get defensive, and the worst thing you could do would be to pull away if they get defensive. I know it sounds bad, but if you pull away after they get defensive, you are rewarding that behavior. They learn, oh, if I puff up and get big, mean, and scary, then that big animal that was going to eat me goes away.
That's my other tip, specifically about snakes, but I would say any reptile, honestly. Actually, I don't know why I just said specifically snakes, because it's not, now that I'm thinking about it.
It's conditioning. It's animal conditioning.
It's all of them. But I would never, ever put a reptile back into their enclosure until you can tell from their body language that they have calmed down.
They're relaxed, yeah.
Because if they learn that if they get defensive, they puff up, they start, striking, whatever the animal is, whatever their defensive behaviors are, if they're doing those defensive behaviors and they get back in their enclosure, they learn that I get back.
That's exactly it. So you have to make the commitment. If you put your hand near them, you have to pay attention to their body language. Like, don't push them past their comfort level, but maybe just like eensy bit closer, right? Yes. And then they're like, and you just gotta stay there.
You stay.
And if that means you take a bite, like that could be the case. But the worst thing you could do
is pull away.
Mm-hmm.
Or put them back in the enclosure.
Correct. Whatever the circumstances are. Yeah. So once you're able to be at the point where you can put your hand near them, that is huge. Take the win. Like, acknowledge that is a very big deal. The day that your animal eats in front of you, take the win. That is a huge milestone, especially with chameleons, because they are very shy eaters and it requires both their eyes to be locked in on their food. Yeah. Whereas typically they can at least keep one eye on you and then do whatever else they're doing. They have to look away from you in order to eat. So there's an insane level of trust of, I'm going to look away from this potential threat to eat this food. And a lot of people will bring home new chameleons where they'll eat right away in front of them.
Some will.
But then they'll go like 2 weeks and then they'll stop eating in front of them. And they're like, what happened? Like, they're now settled into their enclosure, which is why we have that 2 week period. So There's incremental
Yeah.
baby steps, having them eat in front of you. You can sit across the room of your reptile. Just be near their enclosure. Listen to the podcast, scroll on TikTok, read a book.
That's something else, yeah, is just being near the enclosure often allows them to get used to your presence. And I would say the same thing with kind of what I said earlier about setting the scene. What I would do all the time I would put Tarzan on my bed. This was in a different house, so I pretty much only had my bedroom to do this. And so I would put all of, the enrichment stuff on the bed. I would let him be on the bed, but while I was allowing him time to explore, when they're having that exploration time or whatever, be near them, be walking around, be moving your hands over their area so that they get used to frequent movements. They get used to you being in their presence, and that will start to familiarize themselves, because there will be some snakes that, are really hesitant with like quick movements, and that's Tarzan, anacondas are like that. And so you want them to get used to not necessarily quick movements, because you don't want to spook them, but you do want them to get used to you moving around them. Because if you're just holding them and you're talking to somebody and you get in their face and they suddenly freak out, you want to avoid that. So if you get them used to you just being in their space, in their environment, your hands are moving and stuff like that, they'll eventually get desensitized to that.
Would you? That sounds something that would be like an intermediate step, though, right? Not something
Totally.
you would want to do right away.
I would say kind of in the beginning.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm just imagining, and this is me being a naive. I don't know anything about snake behavior, but I'm just falling on stereotypes of that could make them potentially like get into a defensive posture if you're kind of like up in their space.
But as long as they're not striking, they're learning. They'll definitely.
So there's like a kind of line you're towing.
You can't really avoid them getting into a defensive posture.
Okay.
They'll do that. The goal is not to get them. The goal is not to make them not defensive. It's to just make sure that they're not striking at all. Really.
Got it.
So they're going to get defensive on occasion, and most snakes will pull back into that posture literally with you just standing there. So there's not a lot you can do to avoid that. But as long as they're not striking, they're learning, oh, that didn't hurt. Nothing happened.
Okay.
That was
Okay.
fine. So
Cool.
It's actually okay if they get into that posture in the beginning, because they're going to regardless. So it's as long as you're kind of working into it. It can be an intermediate step, but I don't know. I did it with Tarzan right away.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
One other thing I want to talk about with just handling lizards, because you talked about the tap and hook with snakes.
Yeah.
For lizards, having an open palm is a big deal. So they can have little mini branches to grip onto. I see a lot of new keepers trying to have these closed hands when they're handling. So trying to just open up your fingers to give them things to climb on.
Yeah.
Coming from underneath versus up above, kind of like a swooping, scooping motion can be really good. If you can't get that close, offering up a hand with a treat bug right in front can kind of coax them out. Offering like a little tap from behind so then they come forward can be a really good option. And just learning their behaviors.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of nuances. Oh, and they'll climb up. A lot of arboreal species feel comfortable being up high. So trying to get them to come down is not going to happen.
Yeah.
And trying to put them back in their enclosure at a downward angle, like they want to go up, they'll probably end up on your head somehow.
Always. I have so many pictures of Barney just in my hair.
Yeah.
A lot of snakes will do that too, actually. I mean, I also have a ton of photos of Hazel all up in my ponytail too. But I honestly think the open palm is huge for any reptile, just because I even do that with all of my snakes, is I kind of will allow them to, get up on there. And because I honestly think closed fists and things like that can be a little threatening sometimes. So.
And I just want us to touch briefly on handling New Caledonian species, because there's also some nuances with that. So this could be gargoyle geckos, crested geckos, any of those guys that are just jumpy little boogers. And so you have to be mindful that when you're handling them, there's a good chance you're going to go splat because they're going to jump off your hand. So giving them somewhere to go can be helpful, even if it's a couple inches away. You should, and this, again, any reptile, you should always be anticipating where they're going to try to go next. And if you're doing that, if they're in your hands versus on your body or on the ground or something, you want to make sure that, like you said, there's somewhere for them to go. And so you should be anticipating, it looks like they're going in that direction, so I'm going to have my hand this way, and you just kind of follow suit. Yeah, you got to learn the crouch of the geckos, because they get ready and then they just take off.
Yeah. Well, I would say it's the exact same with leopard geckos, African fat-tailed geckos, because they're gonna fall right off your hand.
Oh, yeah.
So you got to kind of make sure that you're leading the pathway for them, essentially.
Yes. Which comes with practice and time, and you'll figure it out. And chameleons are so cute because they'll you kind of grab it up, but they're looking for somewhere to go next. Totally. So that's on you to offer
the next place.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Yep. And don't underestimate, chameleons will also jump.
Yeah.
So
Neptune is known for that.
Venus has also done it.
Yes.
A little splat. And I'm like,
no, it's a terrifying feeling when they jump off of
but it's a defensive thing, right? They'd rather take the splat than the threat that's currently in front of them.
Such a sad thought.
I know. I feel terrible. So Venus is a jumper for sure. Yes. She hasn't quite grown out of it yet. Yeah. Neptune grew out of it very quickly, but Venus will still try to jump. So
yeah, that's definitely important. That little pathway.
But it wasn't even a path. She wasn't even moving. She was holding still and then just went boink.
Yeah, in all honesty,
and just jumped off.
Just have your secondary hand there, regardless. Wherever they're pointing or whichever direction they're going, just have a hand there. It's a smart move.
She was on her way out. Yeah. She was like, bye. So those are a lot of our tips and tricks for taming, for handling. I think there's also just worth mentioning at the very end of this that if your animal is just, you've put in all this time, all this work. For you, it's Hazel. For me, it's Neptune. We have put in so much time with both of these animals, and they have just told us through their behavior, through their body language, through their temperament, through everything, that they're like, hey, I'd rather just prefer to be in my enclosure.
Be left alone.
And there's something just peaceful of knowing that and accepting that this is a look at animal, and you enjoy them, and you make sure they're thriving, and both of us feel comfortable that we can take them out no matter what. So it's not like we're afraid of them or unable to. It is just a choice that, hey, this animal does better when left alone.
There just comes a certain point where when you've tried everything and nothing is changing, nothing is improving, they're not calming down more. You hit that point where it's like it's the selfish question of what is the point of this? What are they getting out of it?
Right.
And if the answer is nothing, then in my opinion, it's best to leave that animal with that respect of, okay, I will respect your space unless I have to get you out, then it's not a choice. But for like 9 times out of 10, I will respect your space and I will let you, do your thing. And that's something, with Hazel, I realized with the body language. And just speaking of body language, I would say probably the number one indicator for most animals, it depends on the animal, of course, but for most animals is paying attention to their breathing. If they're breathing super fast and heavy, they're not calm. They're not chilling out.
And there's a certain point where you can try to push through that. And then there's a certain point where you acknowledge, hey, this animal is in a stressful situation. I'm not seeing improvements. The outcome is not worth the stress that I'm putting this animal through. And that's when you have your moment of like, we're good.
But again, that decision should not be made until you are 100% confident that you could handle that animal at any given time.
Correct.
You have to get that, because in all honesty, like we were talking about the selfish thing, sometimes you have to be selfish in the beginning of like, I have to be able to handle this animal for, critical medical things, emergencies.
You cannot be
like
afraid of your animal. Yeah. You cannot be timid or nervous in case of emergency when your emotions could potentially be heightened. You have to have a game plan. I know if I have 2 sticks, I can get Neptune out in under 2 minutes.
Yes.
I am 100% confident in that. If I did not have that, then that would be a completely different scenario. Whether or not you should even own this animal comes into question. Is their health and well-being potentially at risk? Like, that is a much bigger conversation.
I would say in the beginning, it should be a little bit selfish, but also hopefully mutually beneficial. But once you get to the point where you are confident, and that's when you stop being selfish. That's when you start looking at them and being like, okay, I'm confident. I feel good about this no matter what. Now, what are you getting out of it? Are you confident? Are you still terrified of me?
Right.
Are you still hating every second of this? Maybe let's rethink now.
So we're good. Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents on that. All right. Well, now that we've wrapped up all of our tips and tricks, we'll get into our favorite segment, Are You the Type? And today, the question is, are you the type of girl to prefer working from home or working from the office?
Yeah.
This is very relevant.
It is very relevant. And I just want to say these Are You the Type segments have become
favorite.
Like one of my...
I love it.
In the Smash and Pass. I really like that one too. But
we need to do another one of those soon. We haven't done one in a second, I think.
Yeah. So this is relevant because I just started a new job and I've been working remotely for many, many years at this point. Like even before COVID and all that, I worked primarily from home. So now I have to go into the office 3 days a week. And that has been an adjustment. And you also went from working in the office all the time to now working from home. So I thought this was a very just like relevant topic because I'm currently in that like
you're in the transition. Right in the middle of
having to put on real clothes and not my leggings and like make a lunch and the whole shebang. But to answer the question of like, are you the type of girl? I would say I prefer going into the office, but what I have to do is the 3 days in the office, 2 days from home. That I think is going to be my sweet spot.
I was gonna say it's kind of a sweet spot. It's like a perfect middle ground between the two. So a company that I used to work for switched to that after the pandemic, and I've always looked back at that company and been like, that was the move.
Yeah,
that was a good one. So for me, it's interesting because being as extroverted as I am, I was always an in the office girl. Like when the pandemic hit, I was not okay.
You were like visibly upset. Like you were angry. Not happy.
I was angry that I had to be home. I was so frustrated. I felt so isolated. I even had a roommate. Like, what was wrong with me? Like, I look back at that, I'm like, I was in such a lucky situation. I was like not alone. I was like weirdly started dating Logan in the middle of the pandemic. Like I was fine, but I was being really dramatic and I hated it. I hated being home. I had always thrived in the office setting, always loved it. Now,
you're a work from home girly, like through and through.
I hate going into the office. I hate going in anywhere other than being in my PJs with my dog on my couch working. Like that, it just totally shifted. I honestly and I'm still an extrovert. I still love to be social. And I do go into an office setting, I would say 3 to 4 times a month. Yeah. Which isn't crazy, but it's still not my preference.
No, so as someone who currently lives by myself and works from home, like that was really hard because I spent like 90% of my time being by myself. And this wasn't work remote, but we have like quarterly in-person plannings and like we have an office you can go into if you want to. Like I was remote. Like I worked there for 2 years and did not meet a single one of my teammates.
That's so weird. That's
which
so
I would have at
crazy.
least preferred a
little bit of interaction.
Yeah, in-person interaction. But that, like, I am crazy productive. Like, I felt fine during all of it, but there was just part of me that was like, oh, I kind of wish, because I have been in an office before. And there's just something, again, extroverted. And I'm like, people, the energy, like, there's just been something really great about it. Ask me in 6 months how I feel about having to commute 25 minutes and leave my dog at home all day and have to pack a lunch. We'll see. That's honestly, leaving Ember at home has been probably like the hardest part. And I got her as a puppy when I was working from home. And I was like, okay, if I plan this right, I'm working from home now. So if and when I go into an office, she'll be old enough
but
to
then
like.
You just never did until now.
It's been 2 years. Yeah. And so she's like, she doesn't have to be crated. She's fully potty trained. Like, she's good. Like, it's not like she's like, whatever. Right. But she doesn't know any different. And so I have a little camera on her where I can watch her and I can she's napping like the entire day.
75% of the day.
But there's like part of me, because she's so used to like, if I have time between meetings, we can go for a walk or we can go play outside, or like I can just like give her attention. And so that's been kind of hard.
That's totally hard. I mean, because, your heart breaks for them. You just,
it's part of my routine too, is like to hang out with her.
We've only had Campbell for going on 7 or 8 months now. And like, he would not be okay.
Right?
Like, I think about that because both Logan and I work from home. He is the most spoiled dog ever. He has never, I mean, who knows about his previous lifetime before we found him.
But at least with you guys,
At least with us, he would have no idea what to do every day if we had to go into the office. Like, at least now, if and when I go into the office, he has Logan. So it's like, he doesn't know what it's like.
Yeah, to be all alone. Yeah, so it's an adjustment. I will say, being in an office, and this is like a big campus. So there's like, and everyone's required. So it's different than going into an office and like no one's there. And you're like, what's the point? Like, why am I even here?
So I've experienced that. That's like,
it's
a waste.
Yeah. So there are actually people there. You can feel the energy. Like, it's a really good culture. So I'm very excited for this job and like what's to come. But I will say, transitioning from being full-time remote to now, like, hybrid is an adjustment for sure.
It's like a different weird level of culture shock. It's
Yeah.
like, what is happening?
Yeah, but like maybe I'll make some friends along the way and, you know,
Oh, yeah.
meet some people. And they do a lot of like events on campus, and like there's like I think an ice cream social coming up, and I was like, I'm there.
Right up your alley.
I'm there. Well, I don't know. It didn't say ice cream. It just said cool treat. Come get a cool treat. And I was like, I'm there. Whatever.
It's either ice cream or
Like a
popsicles.
popsicle? Yeah.
I bet. I actually, the fact that they didn't say ice cream leads me to believe it's popsicles.
What if it was like an otter pop? You remember those?
I forgot about those.
Those were good.
Those were fabulous.
And then your mouth would be like from all the plastic that you're like eating, and your mouth is just like destroyed, and your tongue is blue, and you're like, this is the best.
Oh my gosh. My favorite popsicles growing up were the bomb pops.
Oh, yeah.
Those were fabulous.
Classics.
Big fan. But
Yeah. But let us know. Are you the type of girl to prefer to work from home or go into the office, or maybe a hybrid in between?
Hybrid of both. We, you know, like, and you can also have, like me, been one and now you're the other. Who knows?
Complete opposites.
Did a flip that script real fast.
Yeah.
So,
I think having a dog makes a difference though, versus like
such big
just being
difference.
by yourself
Such big
and a
difference.
husband, right? Because then
That
you're
too.
like,
Yeah.
you're, you know,
I'm never alone.
Yeah.
Ever.
yeah. Cool. Well, I think this was a fun episode full of tips and tricks and like something we both enjoy talking about with like, you know, handling and building trust. And
it's a process. It's also like every reptile that you tame, you'll learn something new. So
oh yeah,
it's a whole situation, but we hope you guys enjoyed, and let us know everything on your end, but also give us a follow, give us a subscribe, leave us
rate
a voice
the
memo.
podcast. Yeah. Oh, and thank you to everyone who subscribes to Early Access. We hope you enjoy doing that.
We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you later next time.
Bye.
Bye.